The trembling in Lieutenant Commander Thomas Dyer's hands betrayed his exhaustion. 3 sleepless days had left their mark. His bloodshot eyes struggled to focus on the decoded Japanese text. The date read, May 20th, 1942. Deep beneath Pearl Harbor's administrative building in a cramped station basement, these intercepted words carried the weight of the entire Pacific War. Enemy forces at Target AF would include 2 aircraft carriers. 7 heavy cruisers would provide support. Numerous destroyers would screen the formation. The IBM tabulating machines had just processed this intelligence. Operational Order 14 contained something extraordinary. Admiral Yamamoto's complete battle strategy lay exposed before them. The Japanese believed this would deliver their decisive victory. What they didn't know would destroy them. Hidden in this windowless dungeon, American cryptanalysts had accomplished the impossible. JN-25, Japan's most sophisticated naval cipher, had been cracked wide open. The Imperial Japanese Navy remained completely unaware of this catastrophic security breach. Commander Joseph John Rochefort shuffled across the concrete floor. His house slippers made soft, scraping sounds. The smoking jacket he wore had become his uniform. Days blended together in this underground world. His bathrobe told the story of endless hours. The fabric showed stains from countless meals eaten at his desk. His staff had stopped commenting on his appearance. A small sign sat prominently on his cluttered workspace. The message read simply, "You don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps." Behind this disheveled exterior operated the most brilliant cryptanalytic mind in naval intelligence. Japanese admirals planning their massive offensive had no conception of what awaited them. They were walking blindly into the most devastating intelligence trap in maritime warfare history. Their systematic blindness to code compromise would prove fatal. The dungeon earned its nickname through harsh conditions. Poor ventilation made breathing difficult. The basement stayed perpetually cold. Dampness seeped through the walls. Yet this miserable space processed 140 Japanese messages every single day. By month's end, the volume would increase dramatically. Critical days before Admiral Chester Nimitz issued his Midway orders approached rapidly. Japanese confidence in their cryptographic superiority remained absolute. Their most classified operational plans continued flowing through channels they considered unbreakable. American cryptanalysts intercepted every transmission. The enemy suspected nothing. Mathematics would determine Japanese defeat, not naval gunfire or aerial combat. IBM punch cards in a Pearl Harbor basement held the key. Systematic demolition of Japanese strategic planning occurred through methodical code breaking. The Imperial Navy would trust this compromised system until war's end. June 1, 1939, marked JN-25's introduction. The previous system had served since 1931. Japanese cryptographers in the Navy's 4th Department viewed this as revolutionary. Communications security had reached new heights. This 2-layer encryption system possessed staggering complexity. Breaking it required computational power that shouldn't exist. The initial code contained approximately 30,000 distinct groups. By 1942, expansion had reached nearly 45,000 entries. Each group consisted of 5 digits. Every number was divisible by 3. This mathematical feature served as error detection. Transmission mistakes could be identified instantly. American cryptanalysts found their first foothold in this very quirk. The security feature became a vulnerability. Words received initial encoding through massive code books. Then disguise occurred through false addition. Random numbers from separate cipher tables provided 50,000 possible additives. Captain Ito Tsunezo had personally supervised JN-25's development. He headed the Japanese Navy's Communications Security Section. Post-war interrogations revealed his thinking. "We believed the system was absolutely secure," he admitted. "The possibilities were astronomical. Tens of thousands of code groups combined with 50,000 additives created combinations exceeding human calculation capabilities." The Japanese had made a fatal error in judgment. They never imagined American adaptation of commercial IBM equipment. Machines designed for census data and accounting could perform cryptanalytic functions. These mechanical marvels sorted through millions of combinations. They identified patterns invisible to human analysts. Calculations requiring years of manual work took mere hours. December 1, 1940, brought catastrophe to American codebreakers. JN-25B replaced JN-25A completely. Just over 1 year before Pearl Harbor, months of painstaking work became worthless. They faced starting from absolute zero. The new system required complete reconstruction. War clouds gathered while they scrambled to rebuild their understanding. December 7, 1941, arrived with American cryptanalysts reading perhaps 10% of intercepts, maybe 15% on good days. They sensed increased Japanese naval activity. The general direction was clear, but specific targets remained hidden. Predicting the strike location proved impossible. Station Hypo occupied space that visitors described as utterly depressing. No windows existed in the basement location. Natural light never penetrated these walls. Stale air grew worse as hours passed. IBM machines hummed constantly. Chain-smoking analysts added cigarette smoke to the toxic atmosphere. Newcomers found conditions nearly unbearable. Yet Rochefort had assembled what Admiral Nimitz would later praise as the most valuable intelligence unit in naval warfare history. Personnel numbered roughly 30 to 50 during peak operations. The Midway crisis stretched everyone to their limits. Some of the Navy's most brilliant minds worked in this dungeon. Lieutenant Commander Wesley Ham Wright bore physical resemblance to actor Wallace Beery. This appearance concealed mathematical genius. He would work problems for 48 consecutive hours. Coffee and determination sustained him through impossible sessions. Lieutenant Joseph Finnegan earned the nickname Our Babe Ruth for cryptanalytic home runs. He had barely survived Pearl Harbor when USS Tennessee took direct bomb hits. Rescue from the burning battleship left him with burning desire for revenge. This intensity worried even Rochefort. Finnegan channeled rage into code-breaking with frightening focus. The crucial breakthrough in solving Japanese date-time ciphers came from Finnegan's work. He worked backwards from intercepted weather reports. The super-encipherment protecting operational dates gradually yielded its secrets. Marine Major Alva Red Laswell served as chief translator. Mathematical genius without formal education credentials. He had never finished high school, yet his intuitive understanding of Japanese language patterns proved invaluable. Witnesses described him working with green eyeshade pulled low. Fluorescent lights bothered his concentration. A cigar clenched permanently in his teeth. Japanese text absorbed his complete attention. Commander Thomas Dyer provided mathematical genius behind numerous breakthroughs. His desk sign captured the dungeon's atmosphere perfectly. After particularly intense sessions, colleagues described his emergence unshaven and hollow-eyed. Bloodshot eyes betrayed lack of sleep. His unsteady gait showed how close exhaustion had brought him to collapse. By May 1942, this small team had recovered enough of JN-25B's secrets. Approximately 40% of intercepted traffic became readable. Word-for-word translations remained impossible, but gisting was achievable. Intelligence professionals use this term for determining general meaning and operational significance. This partial understanding would prove sufficient. International Business Machines Corporation equipment represented a revolution Japanese cryptographers never anticipated. Station Hypo operated IBM 601 multiplying punches alongside sorters, collators, and tabulators. Key punches completed the mechanical arsenal. These machines processed thousands of punch cards hourly. Each card contained 80 columns representing intercepted code groups. Systematic pattern recognition provided the breakthrough in mechanization. Cryptanalyst Thomas Dyer noticed something crucial about Japanese radio operators. Despite instructions to begin coding at random cipher table positions, human nature intervened. Operators habitually started at convenient locations. Page 1, line 1 proved popular. Other easily remembered positions created patterns. IBM machines could identify and exploit these human weaknesses with ruthless efficiency. A single IBM processing run in April 1942 revealed extraordinary intelligence. The machines identified certain groups appearing repeatedly at message beginnings. Hamwright developed a hypothesis. These might represent numerals. Japanese messages often began with references like "your message number 473." Comparing these patterns with old Japanese diplomatic codes proved Wright's theory correct. The Navy had obtained these codes years earlier. The Japanese were using identical numeral encoding systems they considered obsolete. This reuse created a massive vulnerability. Custom modifications to IBM equipment were remarkable achievements. By spring 1941, the Navy had commissioned purpose-built machines. Over 75 special attachments were designed specifically for cryptanalytic functions. These machines could perform depth analysis automatically. Identifying messages encoded with identical additive sequences took minutes instead of days. Manual comparison of two 200-letter messages required 10 hours of skilled analyst time. IBM equipment processed identical comparisons in under 3 minutes. The time savings were revolutionary. Financial investment was staggering for that era. The Navy spent hundreds of thousands of dollars annually on IBM equipment rental and custom modifications. The machines consumed enormous amounts of electricity. Station Hypo required its own dedicated power supply to function. Yet without these mechanical marvels, breaking JN-25 would have remained impossible. Imperial Japanese Navy confidence in JN-25 bordered on religious faith. Commander Yamamoto Yuji served as a senior cryptographic officer. Post-war testimony revealed his thinking. "We considered Americans incapable of understanding our language at required levels for cryptanalysis," he stated. "Combined with our mathematical security, we believed JN-25 was not just unbreakable. We believed Americans wouldn't even attempt to break it." This arrogance permeated Japanese military thinking at every level. The Naval General Staff's 1941 intelligence assessment made catastrophic assumptions. Fewer than 100 Americans possessed sufficient Japanese language skills for military translation. None had the combination of linguistic and mathematical expertise required for cryptanalysis. They were spectacularly wrong on both counts. The U.S. Navy had systematically trained officers in Japanese since the 1920s. These officers lived in Japan for years. They achieved near-native fluency through total immersion. The Japanese intelligence assessment was decades out of date. Japanese errors extended beyond underestimating American linguistic capabilities. They ignored human factors, creating cryptographic vulnerabilities. Code security rested on more than mathematical complexity. Radio operators under pressure used shortcuts. Tired clerks began encoding at convenient starting points. Weather stations transmitted reports at identical times using predictable formats. Supply officers sent requisitions with stereotyped language. Each pattern provided what cryptanalysts called cribs. Known or guessed plaintext could unlock entire messages. These human elements proved more valuable than pure mathematical analysis. Japanese institutional rigidity made matters worse. The same culture producing unwavering loyalty prevented critical examination of security procedures. When unusual events occurred, leadership attributed coincidences to superior American reconnaissance. American carriers appearing at precisely correct defensive positions seemed like good intelligence work. Submarines lying in ambush along secret routes appeared to be superior scouting. Naval leadership never considered communications compromise as an explanation. Post-war testimony revealed the depth of this delusion. Admiral Fukudome Shigeru served as Yamamoto's chief of staff. Even after the war, when Americans told us they had been reading our codes, many officers refused to believe it, he stated. They insisted there must have been traitors. April 28, 1942, marked the beginning of Japanese cryptographic security's end. Station Hypo intercepted a message that electrified the basement crew. Japanese naval forces received orders to complete all preparations and await further instructions. The target carried designation AF only. Rochefort had encountered this designation previously. His team had tracked AF references for weeks. Whenever Japanese forces operated near Midway Atoll, this designation appeared consistently in communications. Correlation suggested Midway was the target. But correlation wasn't definitive proof. Washington's codebreakers at OP-20G insisted AF meant the Aleutian Islands. Some analysts suggested Hawaii itself. The debate raged through early May. Admiral Nimitz found himself caught between conflicting intelligence assessments. The stakes were enormous. Rochefort needed absolute proof. The solution came from Jasper Holmes, a submarine officer forcibly retired due to arthritis. He had been recalled to serve in intelligence capacity. Holmes understood Midway's critical vulnerability intimately. The island's water supply depended entirely on a desalination plant. If this plant failed, the garrison would face immediate crisis. On May 19th, Rochefort proposed Holmes's deception plan to Edwin Layton, Nimitz's intelligence officer. Using the secure underwater cable connecting Pearl Harbor to Midway, they would stage a deception. The Japanese could not tap this cable. They would instruct Midway's garrison to broadcast an emergency message in plain language. The message would report that their water distillation plant had suffered an explosion. The trap was set with precision on May 20th. Midway broadcast the fake distress call on frequencies Japanese intelligence monitored routinely. Within 24 hours, Japanese intelligence at Truk intercepted the American message. They immediately reported to Combined Fleet Headquarters using JN-25 encryption. The message read, "AF is short of fresh water due to failure of distillation plant." When Station Hypo decoded this Japanese message on May 22nd, the basement erupted in celebration. They had accomplished two crucial objectives simultaneously. Midway was confirmed as the target beyond any doubt. More importantly, they had proven they were reading current Japanese operational traffic in real time. The Japanese had swallowed the deception completely. They never questioned why Americans would broadcast such sensitive information in clear text. This gullibility revealed dangerous overconfidence in their intelligence gathering. Knowing where the Japanese would attack was crucial intelligence. But Admiral Nimitz needed to know when. Japanese messages included date-time groups that were super-enciphered. These received separate encryption before being encoded in JN-25. This additional layer had frustrated American cryptanalysts for months. The breakthrough came through painstaking analysis of weather reports. Joseph Finnegan noticed that Japanese weather stations transmitted at precise times daily. Their reports always included date and time of observation. By comparing hundreds of these messages with known transmission times, Finnegan and Wright gradually constructed conversion tables. These could transform enciphered date-time groups back to readable dates. On May 24th, the system yielded its most important secret. A message from Yamamoto specified end day as June 4th. The attack would commence at 200 Tokyo time. Another intercept confirmed the Midway invasion force would arrive June 7th. 3 days after the carrier strike would begin the amphibious assault. Edwin Layton reviewed these decrypts carefully before making his famous prediction to Admiral Nimitz. "Admiral, the Japanese will attack Midway on June 4th. They will approach from the northwest at bearing 325 degrees. They will launch their aircraft at 0400 local time from a position 175 miles from Midway." Nimitz studied his intelligence officer's confident demeanor. "You're certain of this assessment, Layton?" "Admiral, I'll be wrong by 5 minutes, 5 degrees, and 5 miles at most." On June 4, 1942, at 0534 local time, a PBY Catalina flying boat spotted the Japanese carrier force, bearing 320 degrees, distance 180 miles from Midway. The intelligence had been virtually perfect. The crown jewel of Station Hypo's code-breaking success came on May 20th with interception of Operational Order 14. This massive 12-part message contained Yamamoto's entire battle plan. Force composition, timing, and coordination between the Midway attack and a Lucian diversion were all revealed. The decoded sections revealed staggering operational detail. The first carrier striking force under Admiral Nagamo would approach Midway from the northwest. 4 carriers would participate: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. These ships would carry 248 aircraft total. The invasion force would include 5,000 troops aboard 12 transports. Support forces would include 7 battleships. Among these was Yamato, the largest battleship ever constructed. Crucially, intercepts in early May confirmed that 2 of Japan's newest carriers would not participate. Shokaku and Zuikaku had suffered damage at Coral Sea. This reduced Japanese carrier strength from 6 to 4. American odds improved dramatically. Other intercepted messages filled in operational details with remarkable precision. A May 13th communication revealed submarine deployments. Submarine Squadron 3 will establish patrol line 150 miles northwest of Hawaii by N2 day. Knowing this, Nimitz ordered his carriers to leave Pearl Harbor on May 28th and 30. They departed before Japanese submarines arrived on June 2nd. Supply messages exposed the operation's massive scale and hidden vulnerabilities. One intercept specified fuel requirements precisely. Tanker Group will provide 2,800 tons heavy oil, 200 tons aviation fuel at position 30 degrees north, 170 degrees east on N+3 day. Such details not only confirmed timing, but revealed Japanese logistical limitations. They were operating at the extreme limit of their supply capabilities. Not everyone believed Station Hypo's analysis. In Washington, Commander John Redman headed OP-20G, the Navy's main cryptanalytics center. He fundamentally disagreed with Rochefort's methods and conclusions. Where Rochefort relied on linguistic understanding and intuitive analysis, Redman emphasized pure mathematical approaches. The Redman brothers wielded considerable influence. John handled cryptanalysis, while his brother Joseph served as Director of Naval Communications. They had powerful allies throughout the Navy Department. They convinced Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, that Rochefort was a maverick. He ignored proper channels and fed Nimitz unreliable intelligence. On May 14th, OP-20G issued a formal intelligence estimate contradicting Hypo's assessment. The Japanese target was probably the Aleutian Islands, possibly the west coast of the United States. They accused Hypo of wishful thinking, seeing what they wanted in ambiguous intercepts. The bureaucratic battle nearly derailed American preparations. Admiral King disliked Rochefort's unmilitary appearance and direct communication with Nimitz. He was inclined to side with Washington's assessment. It took Nimitz's personal intervention, backed by the AF water shortage proof, to maintain focus on Midway. Even after Hypo's vindication at Midway, the Redman brothers sought revenge. They convinced King that Station Hypo had been lucky rather than skilled. Proper cryptanalytic work required Washington's centralized control. By October 1942, Rochefort would be relieved of command. He was sent to oversee a floating dry dock. This humiliating assignment ended the career of the man who made Midway victory possible. Breaking JN-25 required unprecedented international cooperation. The British Far East Combined Bureau, FECB, had originally been established in Hong Kong in 1935. They actually achieved the first breakthrough against JN-25 in 1939. John Tiltman at Bletchley Park identified the system's basic structure. The divisibility by 3 marking all valid code groups provided the initial foothold. When Japan introduced JN-25B on December 1, 1940, the British made an immediate discovery. This saved months of crucial work. The Japanese had changed the codebook, but kept the same additive tables. Messages encoded in late November and early December could be compared to strip away the encryption layer. By March 1941, FECB had recovered nearly 3,000 code groups. They shared this intelligence with American counterparts. The Dutch contribution came from Kamer 14 at Bandung Technical College in Java. Lieutenant Commander Leo Brewer led this operation. The Dutch had intercepted Japanese naval communications since 1936. They possessed unique insights into Japanese radio procedures and operating methods. When Java fell in March 1942, Brewer and his team escaped to Australia. They carried boxes of punch cards containing partially decoded messages. Stationcast on Corregidor made a crucial discovery before their evacuation. In March 1942, they determined that AF was the Japanese designation for Midway. They relayed this information to Station Hypo just before being evacuated by submarine. The 74 personnel of CAST were considered so valuable that multiple submarine runs were required. Evacuation occurred between February and April 1942. They eventually reformed as Frumel in Melbourne. Coordination between these units was remarkable given primitive communications and vast distances. Decoded messages were shared via secure cable. Recovered code groups were distributed through diplomatic pouches. Intercept coverage was synchronized to avoid gaps. By May 1942, the Allies intercepted approximately 60% of Japanese naval radio traffic. They could decode about 40% of intercepted material. The Imperial Japanese Navy's inability to detect JN-25's compromise stemmed from institutional failures beyond mere overconfidence. The Navy's intelligence structure was divided between the 3rd Department, Intelligence, and 4th Department, Communications. This created bureaucratic walls preventing comprehensive security assessment. Captain Itaro Tachibana headed the 3rd Department's American section. He admitted after the war, "We had no mechanism to correlate operational failures with possible communications compromise." When American forces appeared at optimal positions, the Operations Department blamed poor reconnaissance. No one considered that Americans might be reading our messages. Japanese Navy security procedures actually facilitated American code breaking. Message originators were required to include full titles and unit designations. This provided valuable contextual clues. Acknowledgement messages repeated key portions of original communications. Weather reports transmitted at identical times daily provided predictable cribs. Even physical security failures went unnoticed. The January 20, 1942, sinking of submarine I-124 in shallow water off Darwin should have triggered immediate concern. The submarine carried current code books that Australian divers might recover. Yet the Japanese made no emergency code changes. They assumed water depth would prevent salvage. They were catastrophically wrong. Australian divers recovered significant cryptographic material immediately. This intelligence was shared with American code breakers without delay. On June 7, 1942, just 3 days after Midway, the Chicago Tribune published an article that should have destroyed American intelligence advantage. Under the headline, "Navy Had Word of Jap Plan to Strike at Sea," reporter Stanley Johnston revealed details obtainable only through code breaking. Johnston had been aboard the carrier Lexington when it sank at Coral Sea. He had seen classified message traffic while recovering on the cruiser Chester. His article specified Japanese force composition, ship names, and operational intentions. This information screamed code compromise to anyone with intelligence background. President Roosevelt was furious. He considered prosecution under the Espionage Act. Navy Secretary Frank Knox wanted Tribune publisher Colonel Robert McCormick court-martialed despite his civilian status. The Navy prepared charges that could have resulted in the death penalty. Yet, incredibly, Japanese intelligence never noticed the article. No Japanese agent in America reported it. No neutral diplomat mentioned it to Japanese contacts. No German intelligence officer warned their Japanese counterparts. The revelation that should have prompted immediate changes to JN-25 passed completely unnoticed. The grand jury proceedings nearly caused more damage than the original article. Prosecutors would have to explain exactly what Johnston revealed and why it mattered. Testimony would confirm American code-breaking success to anyone paying attention. Recognizing this danger, the Navy dropped all charges. The Tribune went unpunished, but the secret remained miraculously intact. For the cryptanalysts of Station Hypo, victory at Midway brought not celebration, but intensified pressure. They knew the Japanese would eventually change their codes. This could potentially blind American intelligence at a crucial moment. Every day JN-25 remained readable was a precious gift. It could end without warning at any time. The race between American code breaking and Japanese security awareness would continue. The outcome would determine the fate of the Pacific War. In their cramped basement beneath Pearl Harbor, a small group of dedicated cryptanalysts had already changed history. Their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The weight pressing down on these code breakers was crushing. Their minds held secrets that could change everything. They knew exactly when Japanese ships would leave port. They understood where enemy submarines prowled beneath the waves. They could see invasion plans before Japanese commanders even finalized them. This knowledge carried the power to save thousands of American soldiers and sailors. But using this intelligence, too obviously, would expose everything. The Japanese would realize their codes were broken. Rush and his team created careful rules to hide where information really came from. Every single piece of intelligence from broken codes needed a believable cover story. When decoded messages revealed convoy routes, naval commanders were told the information came from submarine sightings. Aircraft had spotted the ships from high altitude. When code-breaking exposed enemy invasion plans, intelligence officers claimed the details came from captured enemy documents. Prisoners had revealed the information under interrogation. The mental pressure showed on every face at Station Hypo. Thomas Dyer stopped sleeping entirely. His eyes burned red from exhaustion. Code groups danced behind his closed eyelids. Numbers and letters swirled through his dreams. He would wake in cold sweats, seeing Japanese characters floating in the darkness. Wesley Wright developed severe anxiety that made his hands shake. Every morning brought fresh terror. Today might be the day Japan changed their codes completely. Today could blind American intelligence forever. His stomach churned with constant worry. His appetite disappeared completely. Joseph Finnegan turned to alcohol for relief. Bottles appeared in his desk drawer. The whiskey burned away memories of decoded messages. Japanese communications described American prisoners being executed. He translated every horrible detail. But acting on this information would reveal the code break. So he filed the messages away and drank to forget what he had read. No single event showed both the incredible power and terrible danger of code breaking better than the assassination of Admiral Yamamoto on April 18, 1943. The mission revealed how far America would go to use its secret advantage. In early April, Station Hypo decoded a message containing every detail of Yamamoto's planned inspection tour. The Japanese had transmitted his complete travel schedule in JN-25 decode. They believed their communications were absolutely secure. The message specified that Yamamoto would arrive at Balele Island at exactly 9:45 in the morning on April 18th. He would be flying in a Betty bomber with 6 Zero fighters as escort. The precision was startling. Japanese staff officers had included every possible detail in what they assumed was unbreakable communication. Flight times, aircraft types, escort numbers, landing schedules. Everything an assassin would need. Admiral Nimitz faced a terrible choice. Yamamoto was Japan's greatest naval mind. He had planned the Pearl Harbor attack. His strategic genius threatened American operations across the Pacific. His death would shatter Japanese morale completely. But intercepting his flight at the exact predicted time and location would clearly show that codes were broken. The decision reached President Roosevelt himself. His response was reportedly simple and direct. Get him. American planners built an elaborate deception around the mission. P-38 Lightning fighters would fly a 435-mile interception route at wave-top height. Other patrol flights would operate in the general area. This would create the appearance of routine activity. Coast watchers would be credited with spotting Yamamoto's aircraft first. On April 18th, exactly as the decoded message had predicted, Yamamoto's plane appeared over Bougainville. The timing was perfect to the minute. American P-38s shot down both Betty bombers in the formation. Yamamoto and his entire staff died in the crash. The Japanese Navy was devastated by the loss of their greatest leader. But incredibly, they made only routine code changes afterward. A board of inquiry concluded that local commanders had been careless with radio security. They never suspected that an intercepted message had led to the ambush. The code break remained secret. By late 1942, breaking JN-25 had transformed from artistic skill to industrial process. Station Hypo was renamed Fleet Radio Unit Pacific. The acronym FRUPAC rolled off tongues more easily. The operation occupied an entire floor of a new building at Pearl Harbor. IBM machines ran continuously in air-conditioned rooms that hummed with mechanical noise. 3 complete shifts of cryptanalysts, translators, and intelligence analysts processed thousands of intercepted messages every single day. The work never stopped. Day shift handed problems to swing shift. Swing shift passed discoveries to night shift. Night shift prepared summaries for day shift. The cycle repeated endlessly. The systematization was remarkable to witness. Punch card operators, mostly young women recruited from Hawaii's commercial businesses, entered intercepted code groups at incredible speed. Their fingers flew across keyboards. Cards piled up in neat stacks. IBM machines sorted these cards by frequency patterns, identifying potential cribs where known phrases might appear. Cryptanalysts attacked the identified weaknesses with mathematical precision. They recovered new code groups and additive values through careful analysis. Translators converted broken messages from Japanese to English. Intelligence analysts synthesized information from hundreds of partial decrypts into coherent military reports. Quality control became absolutely crucial to the operation. Every single recovered code group was verified against multiple intercepted messages. Translation disputes were resolved by committee discussion. Native Japanese speakers always had the final say in meaning. Intelligence reports included confidence levels that distinguished between confirmed facts and educated guesses. The scale of operation was staggering by any measure. By January 1943, Frupak maintained a library containing millions of punch cards. Each card represented intercepted code groups or recovered meanings. The IBM machines performed millions of mathematical comparisons every day. The monthly electricity bill exceeded that of a small American city. Yet despite all this mechanization, human intuition remained absolutely crucial. Only experienced linguists could deduce that certain code groups represented common Japanese military phrases. Only analysts familiar with Japanese naval doctrine could interpret the operational significance of decoded information. Machines could process data, but humans had to understand meaning. While Midway captured newspaper headlines around the world, the systematic destruction of Japan's merchant marine through code intelligence represented JN-25's most devastating long-term impact. By 1943, American submarines were sinking Japanese cargo ships faster than shipyards could replace them. This strangled an island nation completely dependent on imports for survival. The intelligence advantage was absolutely decisive in submarine warfare. Decoded messages revealed exact convoy routes and sailing schedules. They described escort compositions and defensive measures. Submarine commanders received ultra-intelligence directing them to specific ocean coordinates where undefended tankers would appear right on schedule. The Japanese never suspected code compromise was guiding these attacks. They attributed mounting losses to America's growing submarine force rather than intelligence failures. Each sinking seemed like bad luck or skilled seamanship, not systematic intelligence operations. Commander Richard O'Kane, skipper of USS Tang, received a decoded message in October 1944 revealing a convoy carrying aviation fuel from Borneo refineries to Philippine bases. Intelligence positioned Tang perfectly along the convoy route. In one night, Tang sank 7 ships, depriving Japanese aircraft of desperately needed fuel during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. The casualty statistics were absolutely devastating for Japan. American submarines represented less than 2% of Navy personnel, but sank over 30% of Japanese warships and 60% of the merchant marine. Much of this incredible success came from code intelligence, revealing not just where enemy ships would be, but exactly what they carried and how they were defended. By late 1944, Japan had lost so many tankers that warships couldn't obtain fuel for operations. Pilot training was curtailed because aviation fuel was completely unavailable. Island garrisons starved because food transports never arrived at their destinations. The Japanese economy collapsed as raw materials stopped flowing from overseas territories. All of this destruction resulted from submarines guided by intelligence that Japan never knew was compromised. The invisible war of broken codes was destroying the visible empire. Throughout 1943 and 1944, evidence of code compromise accumulated to levels that should have been impossible for any competent intelligence service to ignore. American submarines consistently intercepted convoys at their most vulnerable points. American carrier forces appeared wherever Japanese planning assumed they wouldn't be positioned. American defenders concentrated against Japanese attacks, while leaving other areas completely undefended. Vice Admiral Ugaki Matome, who succeeded Yamamoto as Combined Fleet Chief of Staff, noted disturbing patterns in his personal diary. "The enemy seems to possess a sixth sense about our operations," he wrote. "Every movement is counted in advance. Every plan seems anticipated before execution." Yet even this near recognition of the problem failed to trigger any comprehensive security review. Individual officers noticed suspicious patterns, but institutional blindness prevented systematic investigation. The Navy's faith in JN-25 remained unshaken despite mounting evidence. The Japanese did make periodic changes to JN-25 variants, introducing new versions roughly every 6 months. JN-25C appeared on May 28, 1942, but arrived too late to affect the Midway battle. JN-25D lasted from August 1942 to March 1943, then gave way to newer variants. Each change temporarily reduced American readability, but never for more than a few weeks at most. The fundamental code architecture remained unchanged throughout the war. American cryptanalysts had become so proficient at recovery techniques they could break new variants rapidly. The same mathematical principles applied. The same human errors appeared. The same IBM machines ground through the analysis. The Japanese Navy's faith in their codes survived even direct evidence of compromise. In November 1943, a decoded message revealed the exact route of a convoy carrying reinforcements to Rabaul. The message specified course, changes, and timing precisely. American destroyers intercepted and sank every single transport at the predicted location. Among the survivors was Commander Kato Tetsuo, a communications officer who witnessed the destruction. He reported to headquarters that the Americans were waiting at the exact point where the convoy changed course. "They must have broken our codes," he concluded. His analytical report was dismissed as battle fatigue and combat stress. Kato was reassigned to shore duty immediately. His superiors ordered him never to discuss his delusions about code breaking. The evidence was right there, but nobody wanted to see it. For the men and women who broke JN-25 daily, victory came wrapped in profound moral complexity. They understood their technical success meant death for thousands of Japanese sailors who were simply serving their country with honor. Every decoded message revealing ship positions translated directly into human casualties when submarines struck. Alva Laswell, the Marine Corps translator who decoded countless messages, wrote in a private letter to his family, "I decoded the message that led directly to Yamamoto's death. I had spent months translating his writings and studying his strategic thoughts. When I decoded his travel itinerary, I essentially signed his death warrant with my pencil. That knowledge haunts my dreams." The emotional burden was particularly heavy when intercepts revealed hospital ships, prisoner transports, or refugee vessels trying to evacuate civilians. International law protected such ships from attack, but positive identification often came only through decoded messages that couldn't be acted upon without exposing the source. Some intercepted messages revealed Japanese atrocities against prisoners that couldn't be acted upon without compromising the code break. Thomas Dyer later admitted in interviews, "We regularly decoded messages describing prisoner executions and torture. We had to file them away in silence, knowing that revelation would mean losing access to all future intelligence. The greater good demanded terrible sacrifices. The psychological toll manifested in different ways among different personalities. Some cryptanalysts became obsessed with absolute perfection, terrified that any error in translation might cost American lives. Others developed emotional detachment as a survival mechanism, treating decoded messages as mathematical puzzles rather than descriptions of life and death. Many team members struggled with survivor guilt throughout their lives. They were fighting the war from relative safety, while the intelligence they provided directed other men into mortal combat. The weight of responsibility was crushing for sensitive souls. Despite official neglect and bureaucratic persecution that lasted decades, history has completely vindicated Station Hypo's extraordinary achievement. Admiral Chester Nimitz stated unequivocally in post-war interviews that without the intelligence provided by Rochefort and his dedicated team, the Pacific War would have lasted at least 2 additional years and cost hundreds of thousands more American lives. General Douglas MacArthur, who rarely praised Navy accomplishments, admitted publicly that the Navy's code breakers gave American forces eyes to see and ears to hear what the enemy planned in advance. They transformed the vast Pacific from an unknown ocean into a battlefield where we knew every enemy move before execution. Even Japanese military historians have acknowledged the decisive impact of American code breaking. Professor Tanaka Hiroshi of the Japanese Defense University wrote that the breaking of JN-25 was more devastating to Japan than any single military defeat. Throughout the entire war, Japan was fighting an omniscient enemy who knew our every plan and intention. The true measure of Station Hypo's success lies not just in battles won, but in battles completely avoided through superior intelligence. Knowing Japanese intentions in advance allowed American forces to concentrate strength where needed, while leaving other areas deliberately undefended. This economy of force, enabled entirely by intelligence, allowed America to fight a successful 2-ocean war with resources that would have been completely insufficient without the code-breaking advantage. Yet official recognition came painfully slowly for the heroes involved. Rochefort's treatment was particularly egregious and unjust. Despite Admiral Nimitz's strong recommendation for the Distinguished Service Medal, Admiral King blocked the award entirely. Rochefort was relieved of command in October 1942 and sent to supervise a floating dry dock. He never received another significant intelligence assignment during the war. The medal finally came in 1986, a full 10 years after Rochefort's death. President Reagan presented it to Rochefort's son during a White House ceremony that couldn't undo 4 decades of official neglect and professional destruction. The post-war revelation of American code-breaking success shocked Japanese naval officers more than any other aspect of their comprehensive defeat. During lengthy interrogations, many officers initially refused to believe the claims until American investigators showed them actual decrypted messages they had personally sent years earlier. The psychological impact was absolutely devastating for proud men. They realized they had been fighting an enemy who could read their most secret thoughts and plans. Every operational decision had been observed. Every strategic move had been anticipated. They had been playing poker with their cards face up on the table. Admiral Fukudome Shigeru, who had served as Combined Fleet Chief of Staff throughout most of the war, stated during his 1949 interrogation that if Japanese commanders had known Americans were reading their messages, the entire war would have been fought completely differently. We would have used different strategies and accepted different risks. We were fighting blindfolded against an enemy who could see everything. Captain Watanabe Tsunazo, who had headed the Naval Intelligence Division, was even more direct in his assessment. Our failure to detect code compromise was absolutely inexcusable from a professional standpoint. The warning signs were everywhere around us. Your submarines were always in perfect position. Your carriers appeared where we didn't expect them. We attributed everything to superior reconnaissance and stubbornly refused to consider the impossible truth. The revelation triggered profound soul-searching that continues in Japanese military circles today. How could an intelligence service that had successfully broken Russian codes during the Russo-Japanese War fail so completely to protect its own vital communications? The answer lay in technological ignorance, institutional arrogance, and dangerously rigid thinking patterns. The Japanese had never fully understood the revolution that IBM machines represented for cryptanalysis. While they struggled with manual encryption methods that belonged to the previous century, Americans were processing millions of code groups electronically with unprecedented speed and accuracy. The technological gap was absolutely profound and decisive. One side was fighting with completely outdated methods, while the other employed cutting-edge technology that multiplied human capabilities enormously. It was like bringing swords to a machine gun battle. The breaking of JN-25 established fundamental principles that continue to guide signals intelligence operations today. The entire operation demonstrated conclusively that no code system is truly unbreakable, given sufficient intercepted traffic, adequate computational power, and exceptional human expertise working in coordination. The operation proved that the weakest link in any cryptographic system will always be human behavior. The shortcuts and predictable patterns that operators inevitably develop under operational pressure create vulnerabilities that skilled analysts can exploit systematically. The collaboration model developed specifically for JN-25, combining multiple intercept stations with centralized analytical centers and distributed processing capabilities, became the standard template for modern signals intelligence operations worldwide. The Five Eyes alliance between the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand grew directly from intelligence partnerships first forged during the desperate effort to break Japanese codes. The ethical frameworks carefully developed at Station Hypo continue to influence contemporary intelligence operations. The principle of protecting sources and methods, even at significant tactical cost, remains absolutely paramount in intelligence work. The integration of signals intelligence with operational military planning, pioneered by Rochefort and Nimitz, is now standard doctrine in military establishments worldwide. Most importantly, the JN-25 experience demonstrated that intelligence superiority can completely overcome material disadvantage in warfare. In June 1942, the Japanese Navy was clearly superior in numbers, combat experience, and equipment quality. Yet American code breakers systematically negated all these advantages, enabling inferior forces to achieve decisive victory through superior information and intelligence. Despite its catastrophic impact on Japanese war efforts, the Imperial Navy's intelligence failure offers sobering warnings that remain completely relevant in contemporary conflicts. The same dangerous overconfidence that blinded Japanese cryptographers to security vulnerabilities appears in every era's assessment of supposedly unbreakable security systems. Today's quantum encryption may become tomorrow's elementary exercise for artificial intelligence or quantum computers that don't yet exist. The Japanese Navy's compartmentalization, which prevented comprehensive security assessment across organizational boundaries, mirrors modern bureaucratic divisions that continue to inhibit effective counterintelligence operations. The human factors that ultimately compromise JN-25 security, including laziness, routine, predictability, and overconfidence, remain the primary vulnerabilities in contemporary cryptographic systems worldwide. Technology changes, but human nature remains constant. Most sobering is the psychological dimension of intelligence failure. The Japanese Navy literally couldn't conceive that their codes were broken, because such a possibility fundamentally challenged basic assumptions about Japanese cultural and technological superiority. Similar cognitive blind spots exist in every nation's intelligence apparatus today. Things deemed completely impossible often become achievable through unexpected technological advances or simple human ingenuity. Modern militaries extensively study the JN-25 failure as a cautionary tale about overconfidence, yet often miss its most important lesson entirely. The enemy you systematically underestimate is most likely to achieve your complete defeat. The American cryptanalysts working in a Pearl Harbor basement, dismissed by Japanese intelligence as completely incapable of understanding sophisticated Japanese codes, systematically destroyed the Imperial Navy through patient mathematical analysis and mechanical computation. In 1985, surviving members of Station Hypo held their first and only formal reunion in San Antonio, Texas. Fewer than 30 men attended the gathering. Age, distance, and death had claimed most of the original team that had changed world history from a basement room. They gathered not as celebrated heroes, with chests full of medals, but as elderly men whose greatest professional achievement remained largely unknown to the American public. Most had spent entire careers in silence about their wartime service. Thomas Dyer, then 83 years old and walking with a cane, gave the keynote address to his assembled comrades. "We were mathematicians and linguists, not traditional warriors," he told the group. "We fought our war with pencils and punch cards instead of guns and bombs. Yet we sank more Japanese ships than any task force ever assembled. We saved more American lives than any medical unit in the Pacific. We were invisible then and remain largely invisible now." Joseph Finnegan, sober for 20 years but still bearing deep psychological scars from the war, added his own reflection. "Every Japanese message we successfully decoded represented human lives in the balance. Japanese sailors who would die in submarine attacks, American pilots who would survive because of intelligence warnings. We celebrated technical successes, knowing they meant death for enemies who were simply following orders from their government. That moral burden never completely leaves you." The reunion's most emotionally charged moment came when the surviving group raised a toast to Joe Rochefort, who had died 9 years earlier but remained their spiritual leader and inspiration. His son accepted an American flag that had flown over Pearl Harbor on June 4, 1982, the 40th anniversary of the Midway victory his father had made possible. The accompanying citation read simply, "To the man who made victory possible through intelligence, dedication, and sacrifice that his country failed to properly recognize during his lifetime." The true magnitude of the American code-breaking achievement can be measured in stark statistical terms that reveal both the operation's incredible scale and its absolutely decisive impact on Pacific War outcomes. Code-breaking infrastructure expanded dramatically. Station Hypo employed 30 to 50 personnel during the critical Midway period, expanding to over 100 cryptanalysts by late 1942 at Frupak. Total Pacific cryptanalytic personnel grew from 738 in December 1941 to over 5,000 by war's end. 5 major processing centers operated across the Pacific theater. IBM machines processed millions of mathematical comparisons daily without pause. JN-25 recovery progress showed steady improvement. In December 1941, only 10 to 15% of intercepted messages were partially readable. By April 1942, 20% readability had been achieved. During May 1942 and the Midway battle, 40% of all code groups had been recovered. By December 1942, 60% readability was routine. By war's end, nearly complete recovery of most JN-25 variants was standard. Operational impact statistics were staggering. At Midway, 4 Japanese aircraft carriers were sunk versus 1 American carrier lost. During the submarine campaign, 1,314 Japanese vessels were destroyed by boats guided by intelligence. Merchant shipping losses reached 60% of total Japanese tonnage. Lives saved were estimated in the hundreds of thousands of American casualties prevented through superior intelligence. Japanese intelligence failures were comprehensive. 0 successful identifications of code compromise occurred during the entire war. Multiple incidents that should have triggered immediate security reviews were completely ignored. No comprehensive investigation was conducted even after the Yamamoto assassination clearly indicated intelligence leaks. Post-war interrogations revealed that many officers still refused to believe their codes had been broken. The technological battle between code makers and code breakers in the Pacific represented an early example of how advanced technology would define all future conflicts. While the Japanese continued relying on printed code books and manual encryption, essentially 19th-century technology with minor modifications, the Americans deployed the most advanced computational equipment available anywhere in the world. The IBM machines at Station Hypo could perform thousands of pattern comparisons per hour, systematically searching for mathematical relationships that would take human analysts months to identify through manual methods. Custom modifications allowed standard business machines to perform specialized cryptanalytic functions that their original designers never imagined possible. The technology was primitive by modern computer standards, but absolutely revolutionary for its time period. The Japanese continued believing that manual encryption systems were inherently more secure because they couldn't be analyzed mechanically by machines. This fundamental misunderstanding of technological capabilities doomed their cryptographic efforts from the beginning. They never developed mechanical encryption devices comparable to the German Enigma machines. They never employed IBM-style data processing for their own code work. They never understood that raw computational power could systematically defeat mathematical complexity through brute force analysis. By 1944, American cryptanalysts were already experimenting with even more advanced technologies that pushed the boundaries of possibility. Primitive computers using telephone switching equipment could attack super-enciphered code groups. Photographic techniques allowed rapid copying and distribution of recovered code values. Radio teletype systems enabled near-instantaneous intelligence sharing across vast Pacific distances. Each technological innovation systematically widened the growing gap between expanding American capabilities and static Japanese assumptions about what was possible in cryptanalysis. Joe Rochefort died on July 20, 1976, at Little Company of Mary Hospital in Torrance, California. In his final hours, he granted one last interview from his hospital bed. Too weak to sit up completely, he spoke barely above a whisper to the journalist who had tracked down his story. "People sometimes ask if I'm bitter about my treatment by the Navy bureaucracy," he said slowly. "I'm not bitter at all. The work itself was its own reward. Every Japanese message we successfully decoded meant every American life we potentially saved. That satisfaction is my real medal. We proved conclusively that in modern warfare, accurate information is far more powerful than raw firepower. A small team working in a basement facility defeated the entire Japanese Navy more thoroughly than any fleet engagement could have accomplished. We sank enemy ships with pure mathematics. We destroyed their plans with systematic analysis. We defeated their strategy with superior intelligence. The real lesson for future generations isn't specifically about code-breaking techniques," he continued with effort. "It's about the dangers of institutional hubris and overconfidence." The Japanese were so absolutely certain of their cultural and technological superiority, they literally couldn't conceive of being intellectually outsmarted by Americans. They confused unnecessary complexity with genuine security. They confused ancient tradition with actual strength. They never understood the fundamental truth that the moment you think you're completely safe is precisely when you're most vulnerable to unexpected attack. I spent 3 years of war reading Japanese admirals' personal mail and operational orders, Rochefort reflected. It created the strangest form of intimacy imaginable, understanding your enemies better than they understood themselves or each other. I watched their empire systematically collapse through intercepted messages they absolutely believed were secret and secure. If I have one lasting regret about the entire experience, it's that so many members of my team died without receiving proper recognition for their contributions. They were genuine heroes who couldn't be publicly celebrated because of security requirements. They were warriors who fought their battles with pencils and punch cards instead of rifles and bayonets. History should remember and honor their sacrifice. The Japanese never knew we had completely broken JN-25. Even today, some former officers refuse to believe it actually happened. But we knew the truth, and that secret knowledge was simultaneously our greatest triumph and our heaviest burden. We changed the entire course of world history from a basement room in Pearl Harbor. The story of JN-25 and the dedicated Americans who broke it stands as one of history's greatest intelligence achievements by any measure. A small team of cryptanalysts working with primitive computers and extraordinary dedication systematically demolished Japanese naval communication security and permanently changed the course of World War II. The Japanese Navy never suspected their most trusted code system was comprehensively broken by enemy analysts. Through 3 years of increasingly devastating defeats that defied all logical explanation, they maintained absolute faith in a cryptographic system that betrayed their every operational move to American intelligence. This institutional blindness, rooted in cultural arrogance and systematic intelligence failure, ultimately cost Japan the war in the Pacific. The Americans who successfully broke JN-25 received virtually no public recognition during their lifetimes. Rochefort was professionally destroyed for his success. His team was dispersed and sworn to silence. Their extraordinary achievement remained classified for decades after war's end. Yet their invisible victory was arguably the most decisive element of the entire Pacific War. Today, in an age of digital encryption and emerging quantum computing, the fundamental lessons of JN-25 remain completely relevant for intelligence professionals. No code system is truly unbreakable, given sufficient resources and determination. No security system is perfectly invulnerable to human ingenuity. Human factors including laziness, predictability, and overconfidence remain the greatest vulnerabilities in any cryptographic system. The same institutional blindness that prevented Japan from recognizing obvious code compromise continues to threaten every organization that becomes convinced of its own absolute security. Station Hypo's basement workspace is now used as a mundane storage room. Its revolutionary IBM machines were scrapped decades ago. Its heroes are mostly forgotten by popular history. But their lasting legacy endures in every modern intelligence operation, every successfully broken enemy code, every decoded hostile message. They proved definitively that wars can be won through patience, mathematical brilliance, and the methodical breaking of enemy secrets, rather than purely through firepower and numerical superiority. The Japanese never knew the U.S. Navy had completely cracked their supposedly unbreakable JN-25 code system. That fatal ignorance cost them their Pacific Empire, their naval fleet, and ultimately their war for Asian dominance. In the entire history of intelligence failures, none was more complete, more devastating, or more preventable than Japan's blind faith in a code that had been systematically broken by Americans working in a Pearl Harbor basement. These cryptanalysts intercepted every important message, anticipated every major operation, and patiently waited for the enemy to sail directly into intelligence traps that ultra-intercepts had prepared with mathematical precision. Their remarkable story reminds us that in intelligence warfare, the most dangerous enemy is not necessarily the one who openly threatens you, but the one you never suspect is silently listening to your most secret communications. The Imperial Japanese Navy learned this crucial lesson far too late, discovering only after unconditional surrender that throughout the entire war, American cryptanalysts had been systematically reading their communications, methodically directing their defeat, and ensuring that the Empire of the Rising Sun would set forever on Japan's military ambitions in the Pacific Ocean.